The steaming bowl of rice slipped from Linda's trembling hands, shattering against the concrete floor of her small food truck as her vision blurred and her world tilted sideways. The hot summer afternoon in Boston air hung heavy with the scent of street food vendors in nearby stalls, but Linda could barely register the familiar sounds of her bustling neighborhood market. The ceramic fragments scattered across the ground like broken promises as her legs gave way beneath her. "Mama!" 8-year-old Maya's voice cut through the chaos, her school uniform still crisp despite the sweltering heat. The little girl dropped her mathematics textbook, rushing toward her mother, who was now crumpled between the wooden vegetable crates. Within seconds, concerned neighbors abandoned their own stalls. Mrs. Washington, the local shop owner, was first to reach Linda's side, her weathered hands checking for breath while shouting orders in rapid Spanish. The corner store owner's teenage son sprinted toward the main road, frantically waving down a passing taxi. "Call the hospital," someone yelled above the growing crowd. "She's burning up." Linda's chest rose and fell in shallow, desperate gasps. Beads of sweat mixed with tears on her flushed cheeks as she fought to focus on Maya's terrified face. This wasn't the first time exhaustion had overwhelmed her. 2 jobs, sleepless nights, and months of putting everyone else's needs before her own had finally caught up. But this wasn't just exhaustion. The crushing weight in her chest, the way her heart hammered against her ribs, the metallic taste flooding her mouth. These were warning signs she'd ignored for too long. As the concerned voices grew more distant and the market sounds faded into a muffled hum, Linda's last coherent thought was a prayer. "Please, God, let someone take care of Maya." This moment would change 2 lives forever in ways neither could imagine. If you've ever felt like you're carrying the world on your shoulders, you need to hear this story. Hit that like button if you believe in second chances. 20 minutes later, the emergency doors of Boston Medical Center burst open as paramedics wheeled Linda through the entrance, her unconscious form barely visible beneath the oxygen mask covering her face. Female, approximately 35, severe dehydration, possible cardiac episode, the lead paramedic called out to the waiting medical team. Blood pressure dropping fast. Dr. Priya Chen moved with practiced precision through the controlled chaos, her white coat flowing behind her as she assessed the incoming patient. At 28, she was the youngest attending physician in the emergency department, but her colleagues had learned to trust her steady hands and quick decisions during the most critical moments. "Trauma Bay 2, she directed, her voice cutting through the noise of beeping monitors and urgent conversations. "Start IV fluids immediately, get me a full metabolic panel, and prepare for cardiac monitoring." The hospital's bright overhead lights illuminated Linda's pale complexion as nurses worked efficiently around her. Her breathing was shallow, labored, and her pulse weak but rapid. Dr. Chen's trained eye immediately recognized the signs of someone whose body had been pushed beyond its limits. In the waiting area, Maya sat rigidly in a plastic chair, her small hands clutched tightly in her lap. Mrs. Washington had stayed with her, offering quiet reassurance, while other neighbors from the market began filling the sterile waiting room. The local shop owner whispered prayers in Spanish, while the corner store owner's wife held Maya's schoolbook, keeping it safe for when her mother would ask about her homework. "Is she going to be okay?" Maya asked for the 3rd time, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Chen paused at the family consultation area, kneeling to meet the child's eyes. "We're taking very good care of your mama. She's strong, and we're going to do everything we can to help her feel better." The doctor had seen this scenario too many times. Single mothers pushing themselves to the breaking point, sacrificing their own health to provide for their families. Limited access to preventive care, the stress of financial insecurity, and the impossible burden of carrying everyone else's needs often led to moments exactly like this. Back in the trauma bay, Linda's vital signs began to stabilize slightly as the IV fluids took effect. Dr. Chen reviewed the preliminary blood work, noting the severe anemia and electrolyte imbalances that told the story of months of poor nutrition and chronic stress. "Doctor, her heart rate is normalizing," reported Nurse Sarah, adjusting the cardiac monitor. "Good. Let's get her comfortable and keep monitoring closely." Dr. Chen replied, making notes on the patient chart. Outside, more neighbors arrived. The fruit vendor who always saved the best mangoes for Linda, the Uber driver who never charged her full fare, the seamstress who had been teaching Maya to embroider. They spoke in hushed tones, sharing stories of Linda's kindness, her tireless work ethic, and her devotion to Maya. "She never complains," Mrs. The Washington told the growing group. "Always putting others first, always helping whoever needs it." Dr. Chen finished reviewing the test results and prepared to update the family. She grabbed the chart and walked toward the trauma bay, ready to check on her patient's progress. But as Dr. Chen approached the gurney, something made her freeze. Dr. Priya Chen's clipboard clattered to the floor as she stared at the woman on the gurney, her medical training momentarily forgotten. The steady beeping of monitors faded into background noise as time seemed to stretch impossibly thin. Linda's face, though pale and drawn with exhaustion, held the same gentle features that had been etched into Priya's memory for over 2 decades. The same soft curve of her cheekbones, the same kind eyes that had once looked down at a frightened child with infinite compassion. Dr. Chen's hands began to tremble as a flood of memories crashed over her. Memories she had carefully buried beneath years of medical school, residency, and the demanding pace of hospital life. The harsh hospital lighting seemed to soften as she remembered a different kind of warmth, the scent of home-cooked meals mixing with the sterile smell of antiseptic. "No," she whispered to herself, stepping closer to the bed. "It can't be." But the recognition was undeniable. Those were the same hands that had once placed a steaming bowl of rice into her hungry grasp, the same voice that had sung lullabies to frightened children, the same heart that had opened its doors to anyone in need. Linda's eyes fluttered open, struggling to focus through the haze of medication and fatigue. Her gaze found Dr. Chen's face, and for a moment, confusion clouded her features. Then slowly, a spark of recognition flickered in her tired eyes. "Priya?" Linda's voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from dehydration but unmistakably warm. "Little Priya?" The question hung in the air between them, bridging 20 years of separation in a single breath. Dr. Chen felt her professional composure cracking as tears threatened to spill down her cheeks. The scared, hungry child she had once been seemed to awaken inside her, reaching out for the woman who had been her salvation. "Mama Linda," Dr. Chen breathed, the childhood nickname slipping from her lips before she could stop it. A weak smile spread across Linda's face, the same radiant expression that had once made a dark world seem bright with possibility. "My little girl, you became a doctor." The weight of the moment settled over them both. The helper had become the healer. The child had grown into the caregiver, and fate had brought them together when they needed each other most. Nurse Sarah approached cautiously, sensing the emotional intensity of the moment. "Doctor, is everything all right?" Dr. Y. Chen quickly wiped her eyes, her medical training reasserting itself. "Yes, I'm fine. Continue monitoring her vitals. I need a moment." She stepped back from the bed, her heart racing as she tried to process the impossible coincidence. The woman who had shaped her understanding of compassion, who had taught her that healing begins with caring, was now her patient. Comment below if you've ever been stunned by an unexpected reunion. Sometimes the people who save us don't even know it. 20 years earlier, in a crowded South End neighborhood where hope was a luxury most couldn't afford, 6-year-old Priya Nwosu learned that survival meant staying invisible. After her parents died in a bus accident, she had been taken in by her father's cousin, a woman who viewed the orphaned child as another mouth to feed rather than a life to nurture. The cramped apartment offered little more than a mattress in the corner and scraps of food when there was enough to share. Most days, Priya wandered the busy city streets while her guardian worked, scavenging for discarded fruit peels and hoping someone might offer her a small job in exchange for a meal. The other children in the neighborhood had families who called them home for dinner. Priya had learned to make herself small, to disappear into doorways when the hunger pains became too sharp. That's when she first discovered the community center, a modest concrete building with peeling paint and a hand-painted sign that read, "Everyone welcome." Through the open windows, she could hear laughter, stories being told, and the sound of children learning to read aloud. Linda Torres had started the center with nothing more than determination and a folding table. Despite working long hours at a local manufacturing plant to support her own young daughter, she spent her evenings teaching neighborhood children basic literacy skills. Her resources were limited, but her heart seemed to have endless capacity for the forgotten ones. "Come in, little one," Linda had called to Priya that first evening, noticing the small figure hovering by the doorway. "There's always room for one more." The center became Priya's sanctuary. While other children went home to family dinners, she stayed late, helping Linda clean up and listening to stories about faraway places where children grew up to become doctors, teachers, and engineers. Linda never asked about Priya's home life, but she seemed to understand that some children needed more than just lessons. "You have healing hands, Pequeña," Linda would tell her, watching as Priya gently bandaged a scraped knee or comforted a crying child. "I can see it in the way you care for others." The most powerful moment came on a rainy afternoon when 8-year-old Priya hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her guardian had spent the week's food money on other priorities, and Priya had been too proud to ask for help. She sat in the back of the center, trying to focus on the reading lesson while her stomach cramped with hunger. Linda noticed her struggling and quietly disappeared into the small kitchen area behind the main room. When she returned, she knelt beside Priya and pressed a warm bowl of rice into her small hands. "Every child deserves to dream, Pequeña," Linda whispered, her voice filled with gentle conviction. "Promise me you'll never stop dreaming." The rice was seasoned with love and hope, and as Priya ate, she felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just food. It was proof that someone cared whether she lived or died. Someone believed she was worth saving. From that day forward, Linda made sure Priya never went hungry. She would pack extra portions from her own family's meals, disguising them as leftover food that would go to waste if someone didn't eat it. She helped Priya with her homework, using her own meager earnings to buy school supplies when needed. When Priya showed an interest in helping injured animals they found in the neighborhood, Linda encouraged her. "Healing is a gift," she would say. "If you develop this gift, you can help so many people." The center grew over the years, becoming an informal adoption network for the neighborhood's most vulnerable children. Linda couldn't legally adopt them all, but she created a family where none had existed before. She taught them to see beyond their circumstances, to believe in possibilities that seemed impossible. "Your pain doesn't define you," Linda would tell them during their evening gatherings. "Use your gifts to help others, and your pain will have purpose." Dozens of children passed through those doors, some staying for weeks, others for years. Each one left with something they hadn't possessed when they arrived: the knowledge that they mattered, that someone believed in their potential, and that they had the power to change their own story. Priya excelled in school, driven by a deep desire to honor the faith Linda had placed in her. When she received a scholarship to study medicine at the Boston University, the entire community celebrated. Linda had spent sleepless nights tutoring her, sacrificing her own rest to ensure Priya had every opportunity to succeed. On the day before leaving for university, teenage Priya stood in the center that had been her second home for over a decade. She looked at Linda, who had aged beyond her years from the constant giving, and made a promise that would shape her future. But as teenage Priya left for university, she made a vow she'd one day forgotten: to return and repay the debt of love that had saved her life. Back in the present, Dr. Chen's hands shook as she took Linda's vital signs, the irony not lost on her. The woman who had once been her lifeline now depended on her medical expertise to survive. "Blood pressure is stabilizing," she announced to Nurse Sarah, though her voice carried more emotion than her usual professional tone. "But these test results show severe malnutrition and chronic stress damage. Her body has been running on empty for months." Linda's eyes remained closed as Dr. Chen carefully examined her, noting the signs of someone who had given everything to others while neglecting herself. Her hands, once strong enough to carry the weight of an entire community, now appeared frail and worn. "Mama," Linda whispered, her consciousness drifting between present and memory. "Is Maya safe?" "She's right here," Dr. Chen assured her, glancing toward the waiting area where the 8-year-old sat surrounded by concerned neighbors. "Your daughter is safe, and you're going to be fine." As Linda's condition slowly improved over the next few hours, Dr. Chen found moments between medical procedures to sit beside her bed. The conversations were careful, measured, two adults rediscovering each other across decades of separation. "I never imagined the scared little girl would become a doctor," Linda said during one of her clearer moments, her voice still weak but filled with pride. "You taught me that healing starts with caring," Dr. Chen replied, adjusting the IV drip. "Everything I learned about compassion, I learned from watching you." Word of the reunion spread quickly through the neighborhood. By evening, the hospital waiting room had transformed into an impromptu community gathering. Former students from the center, now adults with families of their own, arrived to check on the woman who had shaped their lives. Dr. Chen took a break from her rounds to meet Maya properly, the daughter of the woman who had been like a mother to her. The child possessed the same quiet strength she remembered in Linda, the same way of watching the world with eyes that saw beyond surface appearances. "Mama always said she just did what anyone would do," Maya told her, clutching a drawing she had made for her mother's room. "Not everyone would," Dr. Chen replied gently, kneeling to the child's level. "That's what made her a hero." The medical team worked efficiently around the emotional reunion, understanding that sometimes healing required more than medication. Chen coordinated with the hospital's social services department to ensure Linda would have proper follow-up care and nutritional support. "We need to address the underlying issues," she explained to her colleagues during the evening briefing. "Chronic stress, inadequate nutrition, and the physical toll of overwork. This is about more than just treating symptoms." As the night shift took over, Dr. Chen remained by Linda's bedside, unwilling to leave until she was certain her childhood savior was truly stable. The machines continued their steady rhythm, confirming what her heart already knew. Linda was fighting, just as she had taught all those children to fight. "The woman who saved me is going to be okay," she whispered to the sleeping figure, her words carrying the weight of 20 years of gratitude. In the waiting room, the community vigil continued. Mrs. Washington organized a meal schedule to ensure Maya would be fed while her mother recovered. The Uber driver offered free transportation to and from the hospital. The seamstress brought clothes for Maya to wear during the extended stay. "This is what Mama Linda taught us," one of the former center children, now a teacher, explained to the younger generation. "We take care of each other. We don't leave anyone behind." Dr. Chen watched through the window as the community rallied around their fallen hero, understanding that this was Linda's true legacy, not just the individual lives she had touched, but the culture of caring she had created. The helper had become the helped, the teacher had become the student, and the child who had once received life-saving care was now in a position to return that gift. Share this story if you believe childhood heroes deserve to be celebrated. Tag someone who was a hero in your childhood. They might not even know it. Word spread through the neighborhood like wildfire. Mama Linda was in the hospital, and her little girl was now her doctor. By the second day, the hospital corridors buzzed with an unusual energy as former students from the community center arrived to pay their respects. These weren't children anymore. They were adults who had built lives on the foundation Linda had provided decades earlier. Samuel Rodriguez, now a successful businessman who owned 3 electronic shops across Boston, was among the first to arrive. 25 years ago, I was sleeping in doorways, he told Dr. Chen during visiting hours. Mama Linda found me stealing bread, and instead of calling the police, she brought me to the center, fed me, taught me to read, helped me get my first job. Everything I have today started with her kindness. Grace Thompson, a primary school teacher, brought her own children to meet the woman who had shaped their mother's life. "I couldn't read a single word when I was 7, she shared with other visitors. Mama Linda spent hours with me every evening, using bottle caps and stones to teach me letters. She always said education was the key to freedom." The most moving testimony came from Ruth Williams, a young mother who had been raising her 3 children alone after her husband's death. "When my family abandoned me, Mama Linda showed me how to be strong," she said, wiping away tears. She taught me that being a single mother wasn't something to be ashamed of. It was proof of how much love one person could carry. Dr. Chen listened to these stories with growing amazement, realizing she was part of something much larger than her own rescue. Linda hadn't just saved individual children. She had created a network of caring that had spread across generations. She never asked for anything in return, explained Marcus Davis, who now ran a small medical clinic in the neighborhood. But she showed us that when you receive help, you have a responsibility to help others. It's not charity, it's community. The hospital social worker, Mrs. Johnson, was amazed by the organized response. "I've never seen anything like this," she confided to Dr. Chen. "Usually, when single mothers are hospitalized, they're alone. But this woman has created an entire support system." The circle of care extended beyond former students. Neighbors who had simply witnessed Linda's work over the years contributed what they could. The local pharmacist offered to fill her prescriptions at cost. The community faith leaders organized prayer sessions. Even the hospital cleaning staff, who had heard about the story, took extra care in maintaining Linda's room. Dr. Chen found herself at the center of these conversations, no longer just a doctor treating a patient, but a living example of what was possible when someone believed in a child's potential. The scared little girl who had once needed saving had become the professional who could now provide salvation. "This is what real healthcare looks like," she told her medical colleagues during a team meeting. "It's not just about treating illness, it's about understanding that healing happens in community." As the days passed, the informal network that had formed around Linda's recovery began to take on a life of its own. Former students started meeting regularly, sharing resources and supporting each other's families. The community center, which had closed years earlier due to lack of funding, was being discussed as a possible renovation project. But the most powerful moment came when Maya made an announcement that would change everything. As Linda's strength returned, so did her determination to continue what she'd started decades ago. "I want to reopen the center," she announced from her hospital bed, her voice growing stronger with each passing day. "But this time, I want to do it right, with proper resources, medical support, and people who can help me carry the load." For the first time in her life, Linda was learning to accept help instead of always giving it. The community that had grown around her bedside became a planning committee, with each former student contributing their skills and resources to rebuild what had been lost. 8-year-old Maya, who had watched her mother's collapse and recovery with mature eyes, made her own declaration. "I want to help kids like you help me, Mama," just like Dr. Priya did. Dr. Chen felt the weight of that moment, the cycle of care passing to yet another generation. She had been making her own plans during Linda's recovery, working with hospital administration to establish a pediatric community health program that would serve the neighborhood where she had grown up. "We're going to bring health care directly to the children who need it most," she explained to Linda during one of their evening conversations. "Regular checkups, nutrition programs, and early intervention for kids who might otherwise slip through the cracks." The businessman Samuel Rodriguez pledged funding for the renovated center. Grace Thompson, the teacher, organized an after-school tutoring program. Ruth Williams, the single mother, established a support group for other women facing similar challenges. Dr. Chen's medical clinic would be housed in the same building as the revived community center, creating a comprehensive support system that addressed both immediate needs and long-term development. The scared child who had once needed protection was now in a position to protect others. "This isn't about charity," Dr. Chen told the planning committee during one of their meetings. "This is about creating sustainable change. We're not just helping individual children. We're building a model that can be replicated in other communities." Maya started her own youth volunteer program, teaching younger children basic first aid and health awareness. At 8 years old, she was already showing the same instincts for caring that had defined her mother's life. The challenges were real and acknowledged. Funding would always be limited. The neighborhood's poverty wasn't going to disappear overnight. Some children would still slip through the cracks despite their best efforts. But the network of care that had formed around Linda's bedside proved that sustainable change was possible. The former students weren't just giving back, they were creating something new, something that honored the past while building toward a better future. "We're not trying to save the world," Linda said during the center's planning meeting. "We're just trying to save the children in our corner of it, and maybe, if we do that well enough, they'll save others." The legacy would continue, not because of one person's heroism, but because that heroism had inspired a community to believe in their own power to create change. 6 months later, as Dr. Chen watched Linda teaching children in the new community health center, she understood something profound. Heroes aren't born from extraordinary circumstances. They're forged in the quiet moments when someone chooses to care. The renovated center buzzed with activity. Children received free health screenings in the morning, attended literacy classes in the afternoon, and gathered for nutritious meals in the evening. Linda moved among them with renewed energy. Her recovery complete, not just physically, but emotionally. She had learned to accept the support that allowed her to give more effectively. "Every child deserves to dream," Linda told the newest group of students, the same words she had spoken to a hungry little girl decades earlier. But now she wasn't carrying the burden alone. Dr. Chen's medical clinic operated next door, providing comprehensive healthcare to families who had never had access before. Maya, now 9, led the younger children in basic first aid training, already showing the leadership qualities that would define her future. The cycle of care continued, but it was stronger now, built on community rather than individual sacrifice. "What did you learn from all this?" Dr. Chen asked Linda during one of their evening walks through the neighborhood. "That receiving help doesn't make you weak," Linda replied thoughtfully. "It makes you sustainable, and that the best way to honor a gift is to multiply it." Dr. Chen nodded, understanding that her own journey had taught her the same lesson. Professional success meant nothing without the compassion that had shaped her. The medical degree hanging on her wall was just paper. The real healing happened in the connections between people who chose to care for each other. As the sun set over Boston, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the two women stood together watching children play in the courtyard. The scared little girl who once received a bowl of rice had become a doctor. The single mother who gave everything had learned to receive. And the community that almost lost its heart had found it again, stronger than ever. The story wasn't ending. It was beginning anew with each child who walked through those doors. Each family that received care, each person who discovered their own power to make a difference. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share it with someone who needs to remember that heroes come in all forms. And most importantly, be someone's hero today. You never know whose life you might change forever.